Hey, everybody, Off the Mic Sports Network here. Another edition of Off the Top Rope, recapping AEW Dynamite for March 26th. Guys, we're like week and a half away from Dynasty in Philadelphia. We already know some of the major matches, but I got to tell you, man, I was bored watching this Dynamite show. Like, there was some good wrestling. Like, hey, Kenny Omega, cool. Anytime I get to see Kenny Omega wrestle, cool. But it didn't serve any purpose. He killed Blake Christian, cool. Blake Christian's a decent wrestler, but it was a squash match to start the show, cool. Whatever. Brody King faces Kyle Fletcher. Brody King loses. Everybody likes Brody King. I don't know why we're doing that match. Kyle Fletcher, who should be more over than he is, but he took some questionable losses. I mean, obviously losing in the cage against Ospreay made a ton of sense given the way that feud was going. But, he could have won the Continental Classic. There's been some weird steps that they've taken with, that. Takeshita faces Mark Briscoe. I love Mark Briscoe. I love Takeshita. Banger of a match. Leads to nothing. Takeshita just lost the international title. And he just this is my problem with AEW. And yes, you could say a lot of things. There are some issues with WWE. At least WWE, when they go into their weekly shows, they have a direction of what they want to do, spanning from the previous week into the next week's show. The AEW's problem is there is really just, it's like a complete reset. Like, why did Kenny Omega need to wrestle on this show against a relative unknown? For those who watched NXT 2.0 in its infancy, they'll probably remember who Blake Christian is. Cool. Like it was a fine match for what it was, but it didn't do anything for Blake Christian. Like people were saying, oh, this might be a good showcase. Hey, Kenny Omega killed the guy in 5 minutes. Who cares? Mark Briscoe and Takeshita. Like, okay, cool. Brody King, Kyle Fletcher, cool. The tag match in the main event was cool. And you get the women to main event the second week in a row. And Toni Storm puts over her opponent, Megan Bayne. But that, even then, you don't need to book a tag team match. But I'll let that one slide just from the fact that Toni Storm was very selfless and put over her opponent to make her look like an even bigger deal and a bigger challenger for her championship at Dynasty. I did like what they did with Swerve Strickland. I like the the promo with him and Moxley. It was honestly probably the best Moxley promo that we've had since the whole Death Riders shtick started. The Willow and Marina stuff is weird. At some point they're gonna have to get to a head. And Willow keeps hinting that she's gonna reunite with Statlander. I don't know where that's going, but Swerve, you did a good job of selling your world title match. Again, I still don't understand why they did that street fight last week. They could have easily done this promo last week and could have done more to build Swerve Strickland into what's going on this week and what's going to be going into the pay-per-view. You basically just lost a week by just doing a match. So more of the stuff like you did with Swerve Strickland and less of these mindless and soulless matches. It's there's a hot crowd there, but at some point, you have to get your fans invested on a week-to-week basis rather than just, shoving a million matches in front of everybody's eyes and expecting people to consistently want to come back. Because it's the fans that were there, those are the fans that are the true diehards of AEW. You're not going to lose those people. But if you want to talk about growth and genuine interest in getting people to come back, then you've got to do a better job of building characters and do a better job of actually making matches that actually matter. Because, listen, am I going to remember that Kyle Fletcher beat Brody King on this show? Probably not. I can't even tell you about 5 moves that happened in this match. I know the finish, and there was a bunch of chops that happened. I can't tell you move for move what happened. There wasn't a compelling story. It was just a couple of big, big in-shape dudes, just beating the crap out of each other. Another example, Will Hobbs. Will Hobbs faces Mark Davis in a random ass match. I love Will Hobbs to death. What does that do for Will Hobbs beating Mark Davis in 5 minutes? That doesn't do anything. It's one thing to give these guys matches to show off their talent, but that's not all that, the sports entertainment and pro wrestling business is. Yes, it's about the wrestling, but you also have to have a meaning, have a why of why these people are on my screen. Why is Top Flight showing up in why is Top Flight having a random squash match? And don't dare tell me, "Oh, they're from Minnesota." Guys, literally you could do that for any wrestler in anybody's hometown. Why does Top Flight get that? And I like Top Flight. That's the mindless and directionless stuff that they just go from week to week, and they're just like, okay, we're in Minnesota. Let's just give Top Flight a match, and and then they just book a bunch of other matches around the show. There was a couple of stories that fed into what they're doing at the pay per view, and hey, cool. Rated FTR is going to challenge the Death Riders. They did a pre-tape package for that to set that up, but it's just like it's a bunch of cheap stuff, and it's very lazy, and it's leading to less of the diehards being really genuinely interested. And yeah, hey, if Swerve Strickland beats John Moxley for the world title, then we'll have a more intriguing build towards, All In, because then you'll have the Owen Hart Cup tournament with Hangman's in it, and they had a good stare down, him and Swerve. Um, I think Osprey's going to be in it. Jay White's going to be in it. I imagine MJF is maybe in it, and MJF's teasing some tension with the Hurt Syndicate, so that's another interesting element. Like, there's a couple of things on this show spewed throughout the show, but if you watch this show from week to week, you're wondering, okay, like what led to this match happening? It's just Tony Khan throwing a bunch of graphics up and saying, "Hey, I'm going to put." It's like literally playing a game of it's like 2K or Madden. It's like, "Hey, I'm just going to throw this. I'm going to throw this person up in the randomizer. I'm going to throw this person in the randomizer, and that's going to be a match." I feel like that's how Tony Khan books his shows weekly. And then occasionally he'll have these other big picture macro storylines, obviously like the world title, which is obvious. And you have stuff like that. It's just, it's soulless, it's lazy, and it's directionless. It doesn't feel like really authentic, and it doesn't feel like they're trying. And I've been saying this for months. Like, and until they do that, you're not going to ever have a chance to pose yourself as a legitimate viable alternative. And people will come to me and say, "Well, Mike, hey, what's your complaint? This is supposed to be an alternative." Yes, this is supposed to be an alternative, but I like the alternative that existed 5 years ago when they were actually trying to tell stories and having compelling angles that led into their matches. It seems like ever since Cody Rhodes and CM Punk walked out the door, they have completely abandoned the basic fundamentals of professional wrestling, and that is within the story. And until they figure that out, like the average fan is not going to care. You're going to have your diehards, and you're going to be able to fill up these smaller venues, which is cool, but it still feels soulless and directionless. So I hope that they get the point, because like I said, good wrestling is fine. I like good wrestling, but what I have discovered and how I've kind of evolved as a wrestling fan is I like for these things to mean something. Like, so each move that you have, or each spot actually thinks it is something. When I see it 1,000 times, or I see a bunch of flips and all over the place, and it's just a random match between Kenny Omega and Blake Christian, and I don't really know anything about the other guy outside of the fact that I may have seen him a couple times in WWE on the NXT product in its infancy, and I think he dated Cora Jade back then. I whatever. But it's just like there's not a lot of intriguing characters. There's not a lot of intriguing storylines. And until they do that, nobody's going to give a shit. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I will have some more content coming up here on the channel. I will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.